part gray grass on the salt flats. The Arizona Territory stretched out like a sun-bleached bone, and the town of Dry Creek sat on its edge like a tick that wouldn't let go. It was 1877 or thereabouts. Time moved different in places where the dust never settled and the silver wagons rolled through regular as heartbeats, leaving nothing behind but wheel ruts and empty promises. Ada Beaumont stood at the window of her late father's house, watching those wagons pass. 23 years old and already wearing widow's weeds, though she'd never been married. The black dress was for her father, dead these 6 months, and for the life she was about to lose come morning. "You keep standing there like a statue. You'll take root," May Delaney said from the doorway. The boarding house owner had brought supper beans and cornbread, same as every night, but Ada hadn't touched it. "Let me take root then," Ada said. "Trees don't have to marry men they despise." May snorted, a sound somewhere between sympathy and resignation. "Trees also don't have debts. Your father, God rest him, left you with both a name and a note that'll swallow this house whole if Keller don't pay it off." Ephraim Keller. Even thinking his name made Ada's skin crawl like she'd walked through cobwebs. 44 years old, with hands that grabbed instead of held and eyes that counted everything they saw like coins in a till. He owned the biggest ranch outside Dry Creek, had the sheriff in his pocket, and come tomorrow, he'd own her too. "There's gotta be another way," Ada said, though they'd had this conversation a dozen times before. "Sure there is. You could sell yourself to the saloon, or starve pretty in the street. Keller's offering marriage, not slavery." Ada turned from the window. "You ever seen a difference between the two?" May's face went soft in a way that made her look older. "No, child. Can't say as I have." Out beyond the town limits, where the salt flats gave way to red rock country, the evening painted shadows long as regrets. The Navajo, or Dine, as they called themselves, had lived here since before the Spanish came with their crosses and cruelty. Now they kept to the high country mostly, trading sometimes in town but never staying long. Smart folks, Ada thought. They knew when a place had gone sour. She'd seen their leader once. At the trading post, Ashki Nez, Tom Nez the white folks called him, trying to force his name into a shape their mouths could handle. He'd been buying ammunition, counting out coins careful as a banker while Deputy Rusk watched from the corner with his hand on his pistol. The Navajo man had noticed her watching and tipped his hat, a gesture so unexpected from an Indian that she'd nearly smiled before remembering herself. He'd been handsome in a way that had nothing to do with the soft city men her father used to invite for supper. Weathered but not worn, like good leather. Kept his hair traditional long but dressed like a white man from the neck down, except for the turquoise at his throat and the knife on his belt carved with symbols she couldn't read. "You're thinking about running," May said, reading her face like one of her dime novels. "I'm thinking about a lot of things." "Well, think about this. Keller's got horses and guns and men who know this desert better than you know your own prayers. You run, he'll catch you, and then the wedding won't be the worst thing that happens tomorrow." Ada said nothing, but her hand found the letter in her pocket, her mother's last words, written on her deathbed. "Live as you choose, not as you're chosen." Easy words for a dying woman, harder for the living. May left the food and closed the door soft as judgment. Ada waited until the house went quiet, then pulled out the small bag she'd hidden behind her father's books. Her mother's Bible, the deed to the house worthless as it was, $40 in silver, and the blue shawl her grandmother had brought from Missouri. Not much to start a life with. But then, she wasn't planning on much of a life. Just freedom, however brief. The moon was new, which meant the darkness would hide her but also make the trail treacherous. She'd need to reach the old mission ruins by dawn from there. She could follow Coyote Wash north into the canyon country, where even Keller's men might think twice about following. She was tying her boots when she heard voices from the street, Keller's laugh, thick with whiskey, and Deputy Rusk's rougher tones. They were early for the bachelor party, or late for common decency. Take care of those Mexican boys at the mine Tuesday next, Rusk was saying. Make it look like they got drunk and fell down the shaft. All of them. Keller sounded amused more than concerned. You want that silver claim free and clear. Don't you can't have them telling tales about who really owns those papers they signed. Ada's hand stilled on her laces. The Chavez brothers, Francisco, Miguel, and young Luis, who wasn't even 18 yet, they'd found silver on what they thought was unclaimed land, not knowing Keller had already filed papers on it through his judge friend. Just make sure my bride doesn't hear about it. Keller said, women get peculiar about blood. Speaking of which, you got the preacher settled. Drunk as a lord and grateful for it, he'll say the words tomorrow and forget them by Monday. Good. I want this legal enough to stand, but not so legal she can complain to anyone who matters. Her daddy's debts die with her name, and I get a young wife to break in proper. Everyone wins. Except her, Rusk said, and they both laughed like he'd told the best joke in the territory. Ada waited until their boots faded down the street, then grabbed her bag and eased out the back door. The stable boy, young Thomas Chavez, cousin to the miners, was dozing in the hay. She touched his shoulder gentle and pressed a silver dollar into his palm when his eyes flew open. For your silence, she whispered. And to warn your cousins. Tuesday next, tell them, stay away from the mine. The boy's eyes went wide as the coin. He was 12, old enough to know danger when he heard it. Where you going, Miss Ada? Away. On foot, you won't make it past Salt Draw before they catch you. Then I'll take a horse. Steal from Mr. Keller. The boy looked scared and impressed in equal measure. He'll hang you sure. He'll have to catch me first. She moved to the stalls where her father's mare, Buttercup, stood patient as salvation. Not the fastest horse, but she knew the trails and wouldn't spook at shadows. Take the paint mare instead, Thomas whispered. She's Indian broke, knows the high country. Mr. Keller won't miss her till morning, and by then she'd be gone or dead. Either seemed better than tomorrow's alternative. The paint mare, unnamed because Keller didn't believe in naming property, stood quiet as Ada saddled her with hands that barely shook. The boy helped tie her bag secure and pointed north. Follow the wash till you see the lightning-struck cottonwood, then bear east toward Squaw Rock. He stopped, ashamed of the word. I mean, toward the grandmother stone. The Navajo got water cached there sometimes. If you're lucky. If she was lucky, she'd make it to the canyons. If she wasn't, well, at least she'd die under stars instead of ceiling beams. She touched the boy's cheek, gentle as his own mother might have. Remember, Tuesday, tell your cousins. I will. Vaya con Dios, miss. She almost laughed. God had been notably absent from Dry Creek for some time now, but she appreciated the thought. The mare moved out smooth and quiet, and Ada Beaumont rode north while the town slept off its Saturday sins. Behind her, the lights of Dry Creek flickered like dying coals. Ahead, the darkness waited patient as fate. By the time the sun rose bloody over the salt flats, she was gone. The only signs of her passing were hoofprints in the dust and a blue shawl thread caught on a piece of mesquite, fluttering like a prayer flag in the dawn wind. Ephraim Keller would wake to find his bride flown and his horse gone. He'd rage and curse and gather his men. He'd put out word that she'd been taken by Indians easier to stomach than the truth that she'd chosen the desert over him. The hunt would begin before the coffee cooled, and Deputy Rusk would oil his guns with the same care another man might tend roses. But for now, in the gray hour before true dawn, Ada Beaumont was free. The paint mare found her footing in the wash, and the red rocks rose around them like cathedral walls. Somewhere up in those canyons, the Dine were waking to tend their sheep and say their morning prayers. Somewhere up there, a different life waited. All she had to do was live long enough to find it. Part 2 tracks on Redstone. The paint mare gave out near Coyote Wash just as the sun hit its noon peak. Ada felt the animal stumble, catch herself, then stand trembling with her head low. Foam flecked the mare's mouth, and her sides heaved like bellows. "I'm sorry, girl," Ada whispered, sliding from the saddle on legs that barely held. "I pushed too hard." The wash was dry as old bones. Its sandy bottom crisscrossed with animal tracks, but no sign of water. Ada's tongue felt like leather in her mouth. The last of her water had gone to the mare an hour back, and now they both stood swaying in the heat like drunks outside a saloon. She'd made good time through the night and morning, but not good enough. Dust clouds rose in the south riders coming fast. Even at this distance, she could count them. 5, maybe 6 men. Keller wouldn't come himself, not at first. He'd send Rusk and whatever hired guns $40 and a promise could buy. The mare needed water and rest, neither of which Ada could provide. She looked around desperate, squinting through the heat shimmer. Red rocks rose on either side of the wash, painted with shadows that promised coolness but no escape. Then she spotted him, Thomas, the stable boy, picking his way down a goat trail on foot. "Miss Ada." He scrambled down the last few feet, sending pebbles rattling. "I came to warn you, they're saying in town you've been kidnapped by Indians. Mr. Keller's offering a $100 reward for your safe return." Kidnapped? She might have laughed if her throat wasn't so dry. How thoughtful of him to worry about my safety. "There's more." The boy pulled a water gourd from his pack, and Ada nearly cried at the sight. "Deputy Rusk, he's got Luke Hardwick with him. And those Baxter brothers from Texas, they're trackers. Real trackers. They'll find you sure." Ada drank careful, just enough to wet her throat, then poured the rest into her hat for the mare. How far behind? "Maybe 2 hours, less if they push hard." Thomas pointed northeast, where the rocks formed a narrow cleft. "There's old Indian drawings up that way, handprints in charcoal. The Navajo use it sometimes for ceremonies. Water, too, if you know where to look. You're risking your neck being here." The boy shrugged, trying to look braver than his 12 years. "You warned my cousins. They lit out for Tucson this morning. All 3. You saved their lives. Miss." At least something good had come from this fool's errand. Ada retied her bag to the saddle, lighter now without the water weight. "Get back to town before they miss you. Tell anyone who asks you saw nothing." "Wait." Tomas dug in his pack again, pulled out something wrapped in cloth. "Tortillas from my mama, and—" He looked embarrassed. "I drew you a map, to the grandmother stone. The Navajo camp moves, but the stone doesn't." Ada took the bundle, touched by kindness she hadn't earned. "Thank you, Tomas." "Vaya con Dios," he said again, then scrambled back up the trail quick as a lizard. Ada watched until he disappeared over the rim, then turned the mare toward the cleft. The handprints were right where he'd said, dozens of them spread across a sandstone wall like black flowers. Some were small as children's hands, others large as dinner plates, all reaching up toward something Ada couldn't see or understand. The mare found the water before Ada did, nostrils flaring at the scent. A natural tank in the rock, filled by some underground seep and sheltered from the sun. They both drank deep. Then Ada let the mare rest in the shade while she studied Thomas's map. It was rough but clear, the wash, the rocks, symbols for water and danger, and there, marked with a careful X, the grandmother stone. Half a day's ride north, if the mare held out, if the posse didn't catch them first, if 100 other things that could go wrong didn't. She was tightening the saddle cinch when she heard it a whistle, low and musical, like a canyon wren, but not quite. The mare's ears pricked forward, but she didn't spook, trained for Indian country, just like Tomas had said. Ada's hand found the old Navy Colt her father had taught her to shoot. She'd never pointed it at anything but bottles and fence posts, but the weight felt reassuring all the same. The whistle came again, closer, then a voice, speaking English with an accent that rolled the words like river stones. "Easy with that iron, ma'am. Nobody here means you harm." He stepped out from behind a boulder, smooth as smoke, the Navajo leader she'd seen at the trading post. Tom Nez, though she remembered his real name, Ashki. He wore the same mix of traditional and white man's clothes, and his hands were empty, spread wide to show no threat. "Mr. Nez," she said, not lowering the gun but not raising it either. "Miss Beaumont." He touched his hat brim, same gesture as before. "Heard there was some excitement in Dry Creek, something about a kidnapping." "You heard wrong?" "I generally do when white folks are telling the story." His eyes, dark and steady, took in her dusty dress, the lathered mare, the gun that shook just slightly in her grip. "That posse's maybe an hour back now, moving fast." "Then I'd better move faster." "On that tired horse through country you don't know." He shook his head. "They'll run you down before sunset, assuming the desert doesn't kill you first." Ada finally lowered the gun. Exhaustion hit her like a physical thing, making her sway. "You offering to help? Why would you do that?" "Maybe because Keller's been eyeing our water rights. Maybe because I don't like seeing anybody hunted like an animal. Or maybe—" He smiled, and it changed his whole face. "Maybe because you're the first white woman to look me in the eye at that trading post instead of through me like I was furniture." "I need to reach the canyons," Ada said. "After that, they can chase shadows for all I care." "The canyons won't hide you, not from those Baxter boys. They learned their trade hunting Apache, and they're good at it." Ashki studied the handprints on the wall like he was reading a book. "But there might be another way. You willing to trust me?" Trust. Such a simple word for such a complicated thing. But what choice did she have? Do I have another option? "You always have options. Just some are better than others." He whistled again. Different pattern this time. 2 more Navajo emerged from the rocks, an older man with silver in his hair and a young woman about Ada's age, carrying a rifle with easy familiarity. "My uncle, Sam Bigay," Ashki said, "and my cousin, Nancy Yazzie." The older man said something in Navajo, his tone disapproving. The woman responded sharper, gesturing at Ada. An argument, clearly, and Ada didn't need to speak the language to know she was the subject. "My uncle thinks helping you will bring trouble," Ashki translated. "Nancy thinks trouble's coming anyway. Might as well choose our side of it." "And what do you think?" Ada asked. "I think," Ashki said careful, "that a man who'd hurt 3 Mexican boys for silver won't stop at hurting Indians for water. Your fight and ours might be closer than you know." He was right. Ada realized. Keller's greed didn't discriminate. He'd take from anyone weaker, destroy anyone in his way. The Chavez brothers today, the Navajo tomorrow, and her. She was just property he'd paid for and wanted delivered. A dust devil spun through the wash, and with it came the sound of horses, closer now. The older man, Sam, moved to the rim to look, then came back speaking rapid Navajo. 6 riders, Ashki translated. "Moving fast but careful. They know you came this way." "Then I'll stand and fight." Even as she said it, Ada knew how foolish it sounded. 1 woman with an old Colt against 6 armed men. Nancy said something that sounded like a curse, then handed her rifle to Ashki and began pulling things from her pack. "She says you're brave but stupid." He translated. "Like most whites, no offense." "None taken." Nancy approached with a clay jar and some kind of plant Ada didn't recognize. She pointed at Ada's boots, then at the paint mare, making gestures Ada couldn't misunderstand. "She wants to mask your scent." Ashki explained. "Old trick. Confuse the trail. Make them think you went a different way." Ada sat on a rock and let Nancy work, rubbing the strong-smelling mixture on her boot soles and the mare's hooves. It stunk like crushed sage and something else, wild and sharp. "This won't fool them long," Ashki warned. "Hour, maybe 2. "Where would I go?" He exchanged looks with his uncle, some silent communication passing between them. Finally, the older man nodded, though he didn't look happy about it. "There's a place," Ashki said. "Hidden canyon our people use sometimes. Sacred ground, not for outsiders. But, he paused, choosing words. Sacred means protected. Even Keller's men might think twice about following there. Might. Better odds than standing here waiting to get shot. He helped her to her feet, steadying her when she swayed. Can you ride? I can do whatever I need to do. He smiled again, quick and approving. I believe you can. They moved fast but careful. Nancy leading the paint mare while Ashki scouted ahead. Sam brought up the rear, brushing out tracks with a juniper branch. They stayed to the rock when they could, avoiding soft sand that would hold prints. Behind them, Ada could hear the posse, now horses, whinnying, men calling to each other. Rusk's voice carried clear, check those handprints, she was here. This way, Ashki whispered, guiding them into a crack in the rock so narrow the mare barely fit. They moved through sideways, stone scraping Ada's arms, until it opened into a hidden valley no bigger than a corral. Stay here, he said. Don't move, don't speak, barely breathe until we come back. Where are you going? To give your friends something to chase. He was already moving. Nancy and Sam with him. There's water in that jar, food in the pack Nancy left. If we don't come back by dawn. You'll come back, Ada said, surprising herself with the certainty. He touched his hat again. Then they were gone, melting into the stone like spirits. Ada was left alone with the mare and the sound of her own heart beating loud as thunder. Time moved strange in that hidden place. The sun tracked across the slot of sky, and she heard the posse pass once, twice, voices raised in frustration, then hoofbeats going different directions, shouts that sounded confused. Later minutes or hours, she couldn't tell. A great cloud of dust rose from the south, and she heard horses running flat out, away from her, chasing something else across the desert. The sun was kissing the western rim when Ashki returned alone, moving quiet as a shadow. They're halfway to Holbrook by now, following 3 Navajo riders they'll never catch. Your uncle and cousin. Safe, better riders than any white man born. He looked tired but satisfied, like a man who'd finished a good day's work. Question now is what to do with you. It was a fair question. She couldn't go back, couldn't go forward without help, couldn't stay hidden forever. I don't suppose you know anyone who needs a cook or a teacher I can read and write and figure sums. Useful skills, he agreed. Less useful when every bounty hunter in the territory is looking for you. Then what would you suggest? He was quiet long enough that Ada started to worry. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful as a man crossing thin ice. My people are having a council tomorrow, about the water rights, about what's coming with men like Keller. You could speak to them, tell what you heard, about the Mexican boys and the rest. Would they listen to me? Some would, some wouldn't, but you'd be under our protection while you're there. And that's not nothing. He paused. It's not an easy thing I'm offering. My people have no reason to love whites, and plenty of reason for the opposite. But you helped those boys, risked your life to warn them. That counts for something. Ada thought about her options, limited as they were. Death in the desert, death at Keller's hands, or a chance slim as it was at something else. All right, she said. I'll come. Then we better move. It's a long ride, and the moon won't wait for us. As they prepared to leave the hidden valley, Ada touched the handprints on the wall. They felt warm, though the sun had already left this place. What do they mean? She asked. Different things to different people. Ashki said, to some, they're prayers. To others, promises, marking that we were here, that we survived. Ada pressed her own palm against the stone, leaving no mark but feeling the connection anyway. She'd survived this day, against all odds. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, she was alive and free and riding towards something that might, just might, be hope. Behind them, the posse would discover their mistake and turn back. Keller would rage, and Rusk would sharpen his knives. The hunt would continue, and the lies would grow. By morning, the story would be that she'd been corrupted, bewitched, stolen by savages for unspeakable purposes. But the truth was simpler and more dangerous. She'd chosen to run, chosen to trust, chosen to live on her own terms rather than die on someone else's. And in the Arizona Territory of 1877, that might have been the most savage act of all. Part 3. If they find us, they'll drown me dead. The storm came from nowhere, as desert storms do. One minute the stars were sharp as glass, the next, clouds black as grief swallowed the moon. The first fat drops hit just as they reached the stone hollow near Coyote Wash, a shallow cave worn smooth by centuries of floodwater. Ada pressed herself against the back wall, shaking not from cold but from something deeper. The paint mare stood at the entrance, nervous, while Ashki watched the horizon with the stillness of a man reading sign. "They're coming," he said quiet. "Maybe an hour behind, maybe less." Lightning flashed, showing the wash below already running with brown water. Not a flood yet, but building. Ada knew what flash floods could do. She'd seen a freight wagon swept away once, mules and all, in water that hadn't been there 5 minutes before. "If they find us, they'll drown me dead." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and suddenly she was crying. All the fear and exhaustion of 2 days hitting at once. That's what Keller told Rusk. Make it look natural. Desert claims lots of folks. Who'd question one more woman lost in a flash flood? Ashki turned from his watch, and in the next lightning flash, she saw something change in his face. He said those exact words. Said it would be cleaner than shooting. No bullet wounds to explain. She wiped her face angry, hating the weakness of tears. "I'm sorry. I don't usually cry when men plan to murder you." He moved closer, careful, like approaching a spooked horse. "Seems a reasonable response to me." Thunder rolled across the canyon, and with it came the sound of horses. Many horses moving fast despite the danger. Ashki whistled sharp, that same bird call from before, and Nancy appeared from the shadows leading 3 Indian ponies. They spoke rapid in Navajo, gesturing at the weather, the wash, the approaching riders. Ada caught her name several times, and Keller's, whatever Nancy was saying, she wasn't happy about it. "The council doesn't meet until tomorrow," Ashki told Ada, "but my cousin thinks waiting that long is foolish. She wants to take you to the village now. Tonight." "No." The word came out harder than Ada intended. "I won't bring trouble to your people, not more than I already have." "Trouble's already here," Nancy said in careful English. "You run, we all run. You hide, we all hide. No difference now." More Navajo emerged from the storm, Sam Bigay and half a dozen others. Men and women both. Some barely older than Tomas. They'd been watching, Ada realized, protecting the approaches to their territory, and now they were caught in the middle of her mess. An old woman, face lined deep as arroyos, pushed through the group. She wore a traditional dress, heavy with silver and turquoise, and carried herself like someone used to being obeyed. She looked at Ada long and hard, then spoke to Ashki in a voice that brooked no argument. "My grandmother," he said, unnecessary. Anyone could see the resemblance in the proud bones of their faces. "She says you have the look of someone marked by death, but also," he paused, translating careful, "also the look of someone who refuses to go quietly." The old woman, Mary Nez, Ashki called her, reached out and touched Ada's tear-stained face. Her fingers were dry as paper, but gentle. She said something that sounded like a question. "She asks if you're willing to fight for your life, or just run from death. There's a difference." "I'll fight," Ada said without hesitation. "But not if it means your people pay the price." Mary Nez smiled, showing gaps where teeth had been. She patted Ada's cheek like she was a child, then turned and began issuing orders that sent everyone moving. "The smokehouse," Ashki translated as people scattered. She says to hide you in the old smokehouse. It's sacred ground outsiders aren't supposed to know it exists, much less enter. But he smiled grim. My grandmother's good at finding exceptions to rules. They moved through the storm, Ada stumbling blind until Nancy took her arm. The younger woman's grip was strong, steadying, and Ada felt a wave of gratitude for this practical kindness. The smokehouse was built into the canyon wall, invisible until you were almost on top of it. Stone and timber construction, old as the handprints, with symbols carved around the entrance that seemed to move in the lightning flashes. Inside, it smelled of centuries of cedar smoke and something else, earthy and deep, women's space. Ada realized, the kind of place where mysteries happen that men weren't meant to understand. "You'll be safe here," Nancy said, helping her to a bench covered in woven blankets. "Even Keller's dogs won't dare enter, too afraid of curses." "Are there curses? I mean—" Nancy's smile was sharp as her grandmother's. "Only on men who enter unwelcome. Women who come in need find only shelter." She left before Ada could ask more questions. Ashki remained at the entrance, caught between duties protecting her but unable to fully enter the women's sacred space. "I'm sorry," Ada said to his shadow. "For all of this, you should have let them take me." "Should is a word for people with choices." He shifted, and lightning showed his profile sharp against the night. "My grandmother lost 3 sons to white man's bullets. My uncle lost his first wife to white man's disease. Nancy's father died in the Long Walk. We all have our reasons for fighting back, and yours are as good as any." The storm was building now, rain coming hard and the wash roaring like a living thing. Over it, barely, came the sound of horses and men shouting. "Get back from the entrance," Ashki ordered. "Whatever happens, don't come out, don't speak, don't even breathe loud." He disappeared into the storm. Ada pressed herself into the darkest corner, hand on her father's Colt, though what good it would do against 6 men she couldn't say. Voices carried on the wind rusk's harsh tones. Keller himself, so he'd come after all, and others she didn't recognize. They were at the village edge, demanding their property be returned. That's what they called her. Property. Like she was a stolen horse or a sack of grain. Mary Nez's voice rose over the storm. Strong, despite her age. Ada didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear denial. Refusal. The kind of stubborn resistance that had kept her people alive despite everything. "Don't play games with me, oh woman!" Keller's voice, ugly with rage. "I know she's here. Her horse is in your pen." Ashki's response was calmer. "Many horses look alike in the dark. Perhaps you're mistaken. Perhaps you need a lesson in respect." That was Rusk, eager for violence as always. What happened next came fast. A scuffle. Someone's cry of pain, then Ashki's voice sharp with authority. "Enough, you're on sovereign land. Mr. Keller, treaty land. You have no authority here." "Treaties." Keller spat the word like something rotten. "Paper promises to savages. I'll have my property back if I have to burn every Hogan in this cesspit." "Try it." Nancy's voice now, cold as winter wind. "See how far you get." Lightning showed the scene in stark tableau. Keller and his men facing a growing crowd of Navajo. Weapons on both sides, but not yet drawn. The storm was choosing sides too. Water rising fast in the wash, cutting off easy retreat. "Listen to me careful," Ashki said, his English precise despite the tension. "Miss Beaumont came to us seeking sanctuary. By the old laws your own government agreed to, we have the right to grant it until her case can be heard fair and proper." "Fair?" Keller laughed ugly. "She's a thief and a runaway bride. Probably spreading her legs for you, Red." The crack of rifle fire cut him off. Nancy had shot his hat clean off his head. Her second shot already chambered before the echo died. "Next one goes lower," she said, pleasant as Sunday dinner. Much lower. For a moment, violence balanced on a knife's edge. Then Mary Nez began to sing high and wordless. a sound that raised the hair on Ada's neck. One by one, other voices joined her, until the night filled with Navajo song competing with the thunder. "You're all witnesses," Keller shouted over the chorus. "When the army comes to clean out this nest of kidnappers and thieves." His words cut off in a gurgle. The wash had overflowed its banks. Brown water sudden as death around the horses' legs. The animals panicked, and suddenly everyone was struggling to get to higher ground. "The woman!" Rusk fought his mount's terror. "Where is she?" But the Navajo were already moving, sure-footed as goats, helping their elders to safety while Keller's men fought the rising water. In the confusion, Ada saw something that made her blood cold. Rusk pouring something from a can into the floodwaters. Oil, she realized. He was poisoning the wash. If she ran now, if they caught her near water, any water. "They mean to do it," she whispered to the empty smokehouse. "Drown me dead and call it accident, just like they planned." Outside, horses screamed and men cursed. The flood was winning, forcing everyone back, until even Keller had to admit defeat. "This isn't over," he roared over the water's voice. "That woman is mine by law and right. I'll be back with the sheriff, the marshal, the whole territorial government if I have to." "Come whenever you like." Ashki called back. "We'll be here. We've always been here." The last Ada saw of them. They were fleeing the canyon, horses belly deep in muddy water that stank of oil. Even after they were gone, she stayed frozen in her corner, shaking with more than cold. Nancy found her there when the storm finally passed, leaving stars reflected in 1,000 puddles. "You can come out now," she said, gentle. "They're gone." "The water," Ada managed through chattering teeth. "Rusk put something in the water." "We saw oil drums hidden upstream too, ready to spill if needed." Nancy's face was grim. "Would have looked like an accident, sure enough. Poor white woman, drowned in a flash flood. Body found miles downstream covered in oil from some unfortunate spill." Ada stood on legs that felt like water themselves. "What now?" "Now," Nancy smiled, and it was almost kind. "Now you meet the council. Now you tell your story. Now we decide if one white woman's trouble is worth a war, because that's what Keller's bringing. Make no mistake." They emerged into a world washed clean, but somehow more dangerous than before. The smokehouse had hidden her for one night, but Ada knew that come dawn, she'd have to face not just her own demons, but the judgment of people who had every reason to throw her to the wolves. In the east, the first pale hint of dawn touched the sky. Somewhere out there, Keller was planning his next move. Somewhere. Rusk was cleaning his guns and dreaming of sanctioned murder. But here, now, Ada was alive. Marked by death, maybe. Like Mary Nez had said, but refusing to go quietly. She touched the carved symbols around the smokehouse entrance, felt their worn, smooth surfaces, and made a promise to whoever might be listening. If they wanted her dead, they'd have to work for it, and she'd make sure the whole territory knew the truth before they succeeded. Thunder rumbled in the distance, the storm moving on to trouble other canyons, but its gift remained the wash running high and wild, a barrier between her and those who'd hunt her. For now, it was enough. Tomorrow would bring its own troubles, but tonight she'd survived. Tonight she was free. Part to confessions under thunder skies. The council fire burned low in the Hogan, smoke curling up through the hold toward stars that seemed too bright after the storm. Ada sat on a woven blanket, feeling the eyes of 24 Navajo elders upon her. Her dress, what was left of it after 3 days running, was still damp from the flood. Nancy had offered her traditional clothing, but Ada had refused. She'd face this judgment as herself, not hiding behind borrowed dress. Mary Nez sat directly across, her weathered face unreadable as sandstone. To her right, Sam Bigay. To her left, a man they called Joseph Tsosi, who'd ridden in that morning from the western camps, and Ashki, standing just outside the circle as was proper for a younger chief. translating when needed but mostly letting Ada speak for herself. "Tell us," Mary Nez said in careful English, "why we should risk war for one white woman." Ada reached into her pocket and pulled out what she'd saved from the flood, the torn piece of her wedding dress, marked with powder burns where Rusk had shot it. Such a small thing to stake lives on. "3 nights ago," she began, voice steady despite the way her hands shook. "I heard Ephraim Keller and Deputy Rusk planning murder. The Chavez brothers, Francisco, Miguel, and young Luis. They found silver on what they thought was free land. Keller had already filed claim through a judge he owns. The plan was to make it look like an accident. Drunk Mexicans falling down a mine shaft. Rusk called it." Joseph Posse leaned forward. "You warned them." "I told young Tomas. They left for Tucson before dawn." "And for this, you run." Sam Begay's tone suggested he'd seen too many whites protect their own to believe one would risk everything for Mexican miners. That was just the start. Ada smoothed the torn fabric, remembering. "Keller owns Judge Harlan in Prescott, Sheriff McKenna in Dry Creek. Half the territorial government takes his money. The marriage." She swallowed hard. "I was the price for my father's debts, but also a test. If Keller could force a banker's daughter to marry him, make it legal enough to stand, but not so legal I could complain, then what else could he take? Whose water, whose land, whose lives?" "Many white men are greedy," an elder woman said from the shadows. "This is not new." "No," Ada agreed. "But Keller's different, smarter. He doesn't just take, he makes it legal first. Papers and judges and laws twisted to serve him. And he's looking at your water rights next." That got their attention. Water was life in the desert, and the treaties that protected their access to springs and washes were fragile as spider silk. "He told Rusk the treaties were paper promises to savages," Ada continued. "Said once he owned the biggest ranch in the territory. He'd need more water. Your water. The springs at Bitter Creek, the seeps near Grandmother's Stone." "You heard this." Mary Nez's eyes were sharp as the knife at her belt. "I heard more." Ada took a breath, knowing the next part would be hardest to speak and harder to hear. "There's a man in Tucson, Colonel Mather. They called him Indian fighter from the war. Keller's been writing to him about solving what he calls the Navajo problem, permanent-like." The temperature in the Hogan seemed to drop 10 degrees. Several elders exchanged looks that said this wasn't the first they'd heard of Colonel Mather. Ashki stepped into the circle then, breaking protocol. "Tell them about the oil." Ada nodded. "The drowning plan, it wasn't just for me. Rusk said they'd tested it before. Amazing how many problems wash away in a flash flood," he said. "Oil drums hidden upstream, ready to burst. Bodies found miles away. Covered in oil, no way to prove they didn't slip and fall." "My nephew," one of the men said sudden, "found dead last spring in Coyote Wash after the rains. Smelled of oil. We thought—" "Accident," another finished. "Like the agent said." The circle grew quiet, each person adding up their own losses, their own accidents that maybe weren't. "You have proof?" Joseph Posse asked. "Beyond your word." Ada spread her hands helpless. "The torn dress, the Chavez brothers alive in Tucson when they should be dead, my word, which I know means little here." "It means something," Nancy said from her place by the door. "She could have stayed quiet, married Keller, lived comfortable on our water and our blood. Instead, she's here." "Because she has nowhere else to go," Sam Begay countered. "Helping us helps her." "Does that make it less true?" Ashki asked. They argued then, in Navajo and English mixed, while Ada sat quiet in the center of their storm. She understood maybe half the words, but all of the fear. They'd survived by being careful, by not giving the whites excuse to break what few treaties remained. Harboring a runaway bride, no matter the truth of her story, was excuse enough for men like Keller. Finally, Mary Nez raised her hand for silence. She studied Ada with eyes that seemed to see through skin to soul beneath. "Your mother," she said sudden. "What was her name?" The question surprised Ada. Elizabeth Harper before she married. From Missouri. Yes. How did you... 20 years ago, a white woman sent food to our people during the hard winter. Blankets, too, and medicine. Never gave her name, but the trader let slip she was a banker's wife from Missouri. Mary smiled thin. We remember kindness, rare as it is. Ada felt tears prick her eyes. Her mother, keeping secrets even then. She never said, "Good deeds done in shadow are worth more than those done in sun." Mary Nez stood, joints creaking. You say you'll fight, but fighting means more than pointing guns. Will you speak truth to your people's courts, knowing they may not believe you, knowing Keller has money to make you look crazy, or worse? I'll speak truth till they shut my mouth with dirt, Ada said fierce. And if we teach you our ways, if you learn to be more than white woman running scared, this is not costume to put on and take off. This is life, hard and real. Ada thought of all she'd been banker's daughter, would-be bride, property to be traded. None of it had been her choice. I want to learn. Mary Nez nodded slow. Then we'll see. The formal part of the council ended, but people lingered, talking soft. Nancy brought Ada coffee and fry bread, the first hot food she'd had in days. She was halfway through eating when Ashki sat beside her, careful to keep proper distance. My grandmother likes you, he said. That's rare. She knew my mother, that's all. No. He was quiet a moment, watching the fire die to coals. She sees something in you, same thing I saw at the trading post. Maybe. Ada felt heat in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. What's that? Someone who looks at people, not through them. He pulled out his knife, the one with the carved handle, turning it so firelight caught the designs. These patterns tell the story of my family. Each line means something, a journey, a loss, a victory. It takes years to learn to read them proper. Will you teach me? He smiled, quick and bright. Maybe, if you're still here when the dust settles. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, but when Keller comes back with papers and soldiers, then I'll fight. She touched the torn fabric of her dress. He wants to own me, use me, make me disappear when I'm inconvenient. I've got nothing left to lose. You have your life. That's not living. The words came fierce as prayer. Watching him destroy the Chavez family, your people. Anyone weak enough to rob, that's not living. That's just breathing while others die. He was quiet long enough that she wondered if she'd offended. Then, my father was a scout for the army. Thought if he helped them, they'd treat us fair. He died believing that lie. Ashki touched a particular swirl on the knife handle. This mark is his, a reminder that helping outsiders costs blood. Then why help me? Because some things are worth the blood they cost. He stood, offered his hand to help her up. Nancy will show you where to sleep. Tomorrow, you learn what it means to live as one of us. His hand was warm, calloused, real in a way nothing had felt since her father died. She held it a moment longer than necessary, then let go, as Nancy led her to a small hogan set aside for guests. Ada caught sight of movement on the canyon rim. Riders, watching, not approaching, just waiting. Keller's men? She asked. Nancy squinted at the silhouettes. Maybe. Or traders. Or army scouts. Always someone watching these days. She touched Ada's shoulder, surprisingly gentle. Get rest. Tomorrow's lessons start before dawn. What kind of lessons? Survival, Nancy said simple. The real kind. Not just hiding from men who'd hurt you, but building a life they can't destroy. That night, Ada lay on unfamiliar blankets, listening to unfamiliar sounds whined in the canyons, speaking a language she didn't know. Nightbirds calling warnings she couldn't read. But for the first time in months, maybe years, she felt something that might have been hope. Outside, thunder rumbled again, promising more storms. Let them come, she thought. She'd weathered worse than weather, and somewhere in this ancient place, among people who had every reason to turn her away but hadn't, she might find what her mother's letter had promised. A life she chose, not one chosen for her. The knife Nancy had left by her bedroll caught moonlight through the smoke hole, not a weapon, but a tool, its handle worn smooth by generations of use. Tomorrow she'd start learning to read its patterns, to understand the stories carved in bone and wood. Tomorrow, she'd begin becoming something more than a runaway bride. But tonight, she simply breathed, free air and free lungs, while somewhere in the darkness, Ashki kept watch and Mary Nez wove plans like the patterns in her blankets complex. Beautiful, stronger than they looked. Thunder crashed closer, and the first drops of new rain began to fall. Ada smiled in the darkness. Let it rain. She'd learned to swim in floods. And if Keller wanted to drown her, he'd have to catch her first. Part 5. The White Flood Night. The sky turned green as old copper just past sunset, and every animal in the canyon knew what was coming. Horses stamped and whinnied, sheep huddled together, and the old women began moving their weaving inside without a word needing to be said. Ada felt it too pressure in her bones, like the world was holding its breath. 3 weeks she'd been with the Navajo now, long enough to read the simpler signs. This wasn't going to be just another storm. "Big water coming," Nancy said, securing the door flap of the hogan they shared. "Maybe the biggest this season." Through the opening, Ada could see riders approaching from the south, many riders, moving with the purposeful speed of men on a mission. Her stomach dropped. They're back, with papers this time. Ashki appeared in the doorway, face grim. "Judge Harlan signed a warrant. Says you stole money from Keller's safe before you ran. $500. "That's a lie." Ada stood so fast she knocked over the water jar. "I never—" "Course it's a lie." His hand touched her shoulder, brief but steadying. "But it's a lie with a legal seal. Gives them authority to search our land, arrest anyone harboring a fugitive." The riders were closer now. Ada counted 15, maybe 20 men. Not just Keller's hired guns, but uniformed 2 cavalry from Fort Defiance, led by a man whose ramrod posture marked him as an officer. "That's Captain Morrison," Ashki said, reading her look. "Fair man, mostly, but he follows orders, and orders are orders." Mary Nez emerged from the council hogan, moving with the deliberate calm of someone who'd weathered many storms. She spoke rapid Navajo, gesturing at the approaching riders, the darkening sky, the wash that was already beginning to run with muddy water. "Grandmother says to let them come." Ashki translated. "The spirits are angry tonight. Best to let heaven and earth sort this out." Lightning split the sky, so close the thunder came instant. In its white light, Ada saw everything clear as day. Keller at the head of the column, Rusk beside him, and behind them men with torches already lit despite the coming rain. They meant to burn the hogans, storm or no storm. They meant to destroy this place that had sheltered her. "No?" Ada started forward, but Nancy caught her arm. "Wait, watch, learn." The riders reached the village edge just as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Captain Morrison rode forward, keeping his mount under control as it danced nervous in the building wind. "By the authority of the territorial court," he called out, voice carrying over the storm, "I'm here to arrest one Ada Beaumont, wanted for theft and breach of contract. Surrender her peacefully, and no harm will come to your people." Mary Nez stepped forward, rain already soaking her silver hair. "No white woman here, Captain, only the people, as has always been." "Don't play games, old woman." Keller pushed past Morrison, face twisted with rage. "I know she's here. Half the territory knows you're hiding her." "What half the territory knows and what is true are different things," Mary said mild. "But you are welcome to search, if your men are not afraid of the storm." As if in answer, Lightning struck the mesa top, showering sparks and rock. Several horses reared, and one of Keller's men crossed himself. Afraid of weather, Rusk spat tobacco juice that the rain washed away instant. Search every dwelling. She's here somewhere. The men dismounted, but reluctant. The rain was coming harder now, and the wash had gone from trickle to stream in minutes. Ada watched from the Hogan doorway as they moved through the village, throwing aside blankets, overturning pots, destroying what they couldn't move. Then Rusk reached the sacred objects. "Don't touch those," Sam Begay warned, stepping between the deputy and a bundle of prayer sticks. Rusk smiled ugly. "Or what, grandfather?" What happened next came too fast to stop. Rusk shoved the old man aside and grabbed the sacred bundle. Sam's grandson, a boy no older than 16, lunged forward to protect the objects. Rusk's gun came up. The shot was lost in a crack of thunder, but Ada saw the boy spin and fall, clutching his shoulder. Blood mixed with the rain on the ground. Everything erupted. Navajo men reached for weapons while women pulled children to safety. Keller's men drew guns. Captain Morrison shouted for order, but the wind stole his words. And the wash roared louder, hungry. "Stop!" Ada burst from the Hogan before anyone could hold her back. "Stop! All of you!" She ran to the fallen boy, dropping beside him in the mud. The wound was bad, but not fatal through the meat of his shoulder, missing bone and artery. She pressed her shawl against it, looking up at the circle of guns. "This is madness. Look at the water." They looked. The wash had become a river, brown and violent, carrying whole trees like toys. The ground under their feet was saturating, turning to soup. "We need to get to high ground," Captain Morrison ordered. "All of us. Now." "Not without my property," Keller snarled. Ada stood, mud-covered and furious. "Then take me, but let these people get to safety first." "No." Ashki moved to stand beside her, knife drawn. "You want her? You go through me." "And me." Nancy appeared on her other side. "And me." Marinez, ancient and unbending. One by one, the Navajo formed a circle around Ada and the wounded boy. Men and women, old and young, united against the storm and the men who'd brought violence to their home. Keller raised his pistol. "I'll kill every last one of..." The ground gave way. Not all at once, but in a sick, sliding motion that sent horses screaming and men scrambling. The whole edge of the wash collapsed, taking two of Keller's men with it. They vanished into the brown water without even time to scream. Move, everyone, move. Order collapsed completely. The flood had cut them off from easy retreat, and the rain made it impossible to see more than a few feet in the chaos. Ada helped carry the wounded boy to the ceremonial Hogan on high ground. Nancy worked beside her, packing the wound with herbs while thunder shook the world. Outside, they could hear horses screaming, men shouting, the terrible sound of earth giving way to water, but also something else: organized voices, Navajo and English mixed, working together. "The children!" someone screamed. "The school Hogan!" Ada looked out to see the small building where the youngest learned their letters, already surrounded by water. 3 children pressed against the window, too terrified to move. Without thinking, she plunged back into the storm. The water was knee-deep and rising, the current strong enough to stagger her. Behind her, she heard Ashki shout her name, but she didn't stop. The door was jammed, swollen with rain. She threw her shoulder against it once, twice, before it gave. The children, 2 girls and a boy, none older than 8, clung to each other crying. "Come on," she said, trying to sound calmer than she felt. "We're going on an adventure." She lifted the smallest girl, but knew she couldn't carry all 3. The water was rising faster now, already past her knees. Then strong arms reached past her, Ashki taking the boy, Nancy grabbing the other girl. Together they fought their way back, the current trying to pull them downstream with every step. They'd just reached safety when a scream cut through the storm. Ada turned to see Rusk in the water, clinging to a cottonwood branch while the flood tried to claim him. His horse was already gone, swept away like paper. Everyone watched. No one moved. The branch was cracking. In seconds, he'd be gone. The man who'd shot a boy, who'd planned to burn Hogan's, who'd gleefully discussed drowning her. Ada met Ashki's eyes. He shook his head slightly, but she was already moving. "The rope!" she shouted. "In the ceremonial Hogan!" They made a human chain, Ada furthest out because she was lightest, Ashki anchoring her, others behind. The water fought them every inch, but they pushed forward until Ada could grab Rusk's wrist just as the branch gave way. For a moment, she held the weight of the man who'd wanted her dead. His eyes met hers, shocked and terrified. She could let go. Everyone would understand. The flood would do what Rusk had planned for her, and there'd be justice in that. Instead, she held on. They pulled him to safety, all of them working together, Navajo hands saving the life of a man who'd shown them nothing but hate. Rusk collapsed in the mud, coughing water and staring at his rescuers like he'd never seen them before. The storm raged on, but something had shifted. Captain Morrison organized his remaining men to help move elders to safety. Keller's hired guns worked beside Navajo men to save horses and supplies. The flood had made them all equal in the face of nature's fury. By dawn, the rain had stopped. The wash still ran high and wild, but no longer rising. The village looked like a battlefield, Hogan's damaged, possessions scattered, the sacred grove of cottonwoods gone entirely. But they'd survived. All of them. Even the 2 men swept away had been found clinging to rocks downstream, battered but breathing. Captain Morrison stood before the assembled crowd, uniform ruined, authority somewhat diminished by the night's events. "The warrant still stands," he said formally. "Miss Beaumont must answer to the charges." "She will," Mary Nez said, "in a proper court, with proper witnesses, including Deputy Rusk, who owes her his life." Rusk, wrapped in a Navajo blanket, said nothing. But when Keller started to protest, the deputy spoke up. "The oil drums, hidden upstream, for making accidents that ain't accidents." The silence stretched long as winter. "I don't know what you're talking about," Keller said, but his voice had gone thin. "I do." Rusk looked at Ada, something almost like shame in his eyes. "I put them there, on your orders, just like you ordered the Chavez accident that weren't no accident." "You're delirious," Keller snapped. "The floods addled your brain." "Maybe." Rusk struggled to his feet. "But I know what I know, and I'm done drowning for you." Captain Morrison looked between them, understanding dawning. "I think we all need to return to Fort Defiance. There are questions that need answering. Legal questions." "She's still a thief." Keller tried one last time. "Am I?" Ada stepped forward, muddy and exhausted, but unbroken. "Then search me. Search my possessions. Find this money I supposedly stole." Of course, they found nothing. How could they? The lie had been meant to give legal cover for violence. Nothing more. As the soldiers prepared to leave with Keller and Rusk both under watch, now Ashki stood beside Ada at the wash's edge. "You could have let him drown," he said quiet. "So could you." "No." He smiled slight. "My grandmother would have scolded me for 100 years. But you had every reason." "Having reasons isn't the same as being right." She watched the brown water carry away pieces of the life they'd built. "Will your people rebuild?" "We always do. It's what we know." He touched her hand, brief but warm. "The question is, will you stay to help?" Ada thought of all the places she couldn't go back to Dry Creek, back to her old life, back to being property traded for debt. Then she looked at the village already stirring to life despite the destruction. People sharing what little they had left, children playing in puddles while adults planned the future. "Where else would I go?" she said, and meant it. The sun rose full over the canyon, painting the wet rocks gold and red. Somewhere, a meadowlark sang, claiming the new day. The flood had washed away the oil, the lies, the old certainties. What remained was harder to name but solid as bedrock truth spoken in extremity. Mercy given when none was deserved. Different peoples standing together against the storm. It wasn't the ending. Keller would fight the charges. The territorial government would resist. The water rights would still be contested. But something fundamental had shifted in the night of the White Flood, when heaven and earth had indeed sorted things out in their own wild way. And Ada Beaumont, no longer bride, no longer property, no longer running, stood at the edge of moving water and chose to stay. Part second dawn on the back ridge. The makeshift court convened on the flattest piece of ground they could find, a natural amphitheater of red rock that had somehow escaped the flood's fury. Judge William Thornton had ridden in from Prescott, a man with the rare reputation of being neither bought nor bullied. His traveling court consisted of a folding table, 2 chairs, and a Bible worn soft as cloth from years of oath-taking. Ada sat on a wool blanket Nancy had woven, the patterns telling stories she was only beginning to read. Around her, the crowd mixed like oil, trying to blend with water Navajo on one side, townspeople from Dry Creek on the other, soldiers keeping uneasy peace between them. May Delaney had come, bless her, bringing something better than moral support. She'd brought evidence. "Found this in Keller's office," she said, producing a leather ledger with the guilty pleasure of someone revealing a winning poker hand. "Figured if the man was fool enough to leave me alone while he went chasing after Miss Ada, I might as well do some reading." Keller, sitting rigid between 2 soldiers, went pale as alkaline dust. "You had no right." "No more right than you had planning murder," May shot back. "Judge, this here ledger shows payments to remove obstacles. $20 here, $50 there, and looky here, $500 marked for Deputy R. services regarding Mexican problem." The judge studied the entries, face revealing nothing. "Mr. Rusk, do you recognize this ledger?" Rusk sat hunched in his borrowed blanket, looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in one night. The Navajo woman who'd tended his cuts had done good work. He'd lived to face whatever came next. "I recognize it," he said quiet. "That 500 was for making sure the Chavez brothers had an accident. They're alive," Captain Morrison noted, "in Tucson, according to the telegram. Because she warned them." Rusk nodded at Ada. "Would have been dead otherwise, just like Keller wanted." "Lies," Keller snarled. "This man's trying to save his own skin by telling the truth," the judge's voice cut sharp. "Mr. Rusk, you're aware that confession to conspiracy to commit murder carries significant penalties." "I'm aware." Rusk met the judge's eyes steady. "I'm also aware that I near drowned last night, and the only reason I'm breathing is because people I tried to hurt pulled me from the water. Figured I owe them truth, at least." The judge turned to Ada. "Miss Beaumont, tell the court in your own words what happened the night you left Dry Creek." Ada stood, smoothing her dress, Nancy's dress now, her own being past salvage. She told it all, simple and clear. The overheard conversation, the planned murders, the forced marriage to steal her father's remaining assets. When she got to the part about the oil drums and the drowning plan, several people in the crowd gasped. "That's why you ran," May Delaney said, understanding dawning. "Not just the marriage, but because you knew what they'd do after." "A wife can't testify against her husband," Ada confirmed. "Dead wives can't testify at all." "Preposterous," Keller burst out. "I offered this woman marriage, security, a place in society. You offered me slavery with a wedding ring," Ada said fierce. "And when I was no longer useful, you planned to murder me and call it God's will." "Can you prove these oil drums exist?" Judge Thornton asked. Captain Morrison stood. "My men found 3 of them this morning, Your Honor, hidden in caves above the wash, rigged to spill when ropes were cut." Would have looked like natural contamination after a flood. The crowd stirred, voices rising. Some of Dry Creek's citizens looked at Keller with new eyes, perhaps remembering their own losses to convenient accidents. "There's more," a new voice said. Joseph Posse stepped forward, the elder who'd ridden from the western camps. "My nephew died last spring in a flash flood. We found him covered in oil, miles downstream. The Indian agent said it was accident, that he must have fallen near some spilled drums." He looked at Keller steady. "But my nephew was trying to file claim on a spring near Box Canyon, same spring that waters Keller's east pasture now." One by one, they came forward. A Mexican shepherd whose brother had vanished. A homesteader whose well had mysteriously gone bad after refusing to sell. Stories of accidents that maybe weren't. Of convenient deaths that cleared the way for Keller's expanding empire. "Your Honor." Keller's lawyer, a nervous man from Phoenix, tried to interrupt. "These are merely allegations without proof." Mary Nez rose from her place among the elders. "We have proof, written in the land, in the bones of our dead, in the tears of widows. This man," she pointed at Keller with a finger steady as fate, "has poisoned more than water. He's poisoned the very idea of law, making it serve greed instead of justice." "The testimony of Indians," the lawyer began, "carries the same weight as any other testimony in my court." Judge Thornton said cold, "Continue, madam." Mary Nez pulled out a bundle wrapped in deerskin. "These are letters from Colonel Mather to Keller, discussing the removal of Navajo people from treaty lands, offering soldiers for hire once he has authority." She handed them to the judge. "We trade at Keller's store sometimes. Amazing what papers get used for wrapping when clerks aren't careful." The judge read, his face darkening with each page. "Mr. Keller, these letters discuss using federal troops for private gain. That's not just conspiracy, that's treason." The court erupted. Keller's supporters fell silent while others called for immediate arrest. Through it all, Ada watched the man who'd tried to own her shrink into himself, schemes collapsing like flood-cut banks. "Order!" Judge Thornton banged his traveling gavel. "I've heard enough. Ephraim Keller, you stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, corruption of federal officers, and attempted unlawful seizure of treaty lands. You'll be held for federal trial." "This is impossible," Keller whispered. "I own this territory. I own the law." "The law," Judge Thornton said, dry as desert wind, "is not for sale. Deputy Rusk, you'll face charges as well, though your cooperation will be considered. Captain Morrison, please take both men into custody." As soldiers moved to comply, Keller made one last desperate play. He lunged for the pistol at Morrison's hip, got it half drawn before three people moved at once, Morrison grabbing his wrist, Nancy's thrown knife pinning his sleeve to the table, and Ada stepping forward to place her father's Colt against his temple. "Try it," she said soft. "Give me the excuse." For a heartbeat, violence balanced on a prayer. Then Keller's hand opened, the pistol dropping harmless to the dirt. He looked at Ada with something like bewilderment. "You were nothing," he said. "A bankrupt banker's daughter. I was giving you everything." "You were giving me a cage," Ada corrected, "and planning my grave beside it." They took him away then, him and Rusk both, though the deputy went quieter, perhaps still feeling the weight of Navajo hands pulling him from the flood. Judge Thornton wasn't finished. "There remains the matter of damages. Mr. Keller's assets will be seized pending trial. The court orders compensation to be paid to all affected parties: the Chavez family, the Navajo Nation for violation of treaty rights, and Miss Beaumont for false imprisonment and attempted murder." "I don't want his money," Ada said quick. "Then donate it," the judge suggested. "But the law requires restitution. Additionally," he studied the crowd, seemed to make a decision. "The water rights previously claimed by Keller are returned to their original status. The springs at Bitter Creek and Box Canyon remain under Navajo treaty protection. The town of Dry Creek and the surrounding communities will need to negotiate fair usage agreements. We've prepared a proposal. Ashki stepped forward with a rolled document. Shared access, shared responsibility, the people and the town working together, not against. Impossible! Someone from Dry Creek shouted. Indians and whites can't. Can't what? May Delaney stood, hands on her hips. Can't share water, can't live as neighbors. Seems to me we all survived the same flood last night. Seems to me those Navajo hands pulled white folk from the water same as their own. The woman's right, Captain Morrison added. I saw more courage and cooperation last night than in my 10 years of service. Perhaps it's time to try something different. The negotiations took the rest of the day, but by sunset, they had an agreement. Water shared according to need, not greed, regular councils between communities, and most surprising, a school where children could learn both ways. Navajo and white, preparing for a future neither side could fully imagine. As the crowd dispersed, Ada found herself standing with Ashki at the wash's edge. The water had calmed, running clear now that the flood-stirred mud had settled. So, he said careful, you're free now. No charges, no debts. Money coming if you want it. You could go anywhere. I could, Ada agreed. San Francisco, maybe Denver. Somewhere civilized, with proper houses and proper people who won't judge you for what happened. Ada laughed, surprising them both. Are you trying to get rid of me? Tom Nez. He smiled, and she realized she'd never used his white name before. Just making sure you know your options. My grandmother says choosing blind is no choice at all. Your grandmother's wise. Ada picked up a smooth stone, turned it in her hands. You know what I learned last night when I held Rusk's hand while the water tried to take him? What's that? That proper people in proper houses would have let him drown and called it justice. But your people, Nancy, who he'd threatened, Sam, who he'd shoved, children who'd seen him bring violence to their home, they all reached out to save him. She threw the stone, watched it skip once, twice, before sinking. That's the kind of people I want to live among. If they'll have me. They'll have you, Mary Nez said, appearing quiet as always. Question is, will you have us? This life's not easy. No fine dresses, no servants, no comfort but what we make ourselves. I've had fine dresses, Ada said. They tore real easy when I needed to run. As for comfort. She looked at the village already rebuilding, people sharing tools and laughter, children playing in puddles while adults plan tomorrow. I see plenty of comfort here. Mary Nez studied her long, then nodded. Nancy will teach you weaving. You'll need something to trade at market. And Ashki, she smiled sly. Ashki will teach you the trails. Good for a woman to know her way in the world. She left them there. Two people caught between worlds, but maybe finding a new one together. The offer stands, Ashki said after a while. Teacher at the new school. You could help children learn their letters, their numbers, both kinds of children. I'd like that. Ada felt something ease in her chest, a tightness she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. Guess I should find somewhere to live first. May offered me a room in town, but you're not a town person anymore. He pulled out his knife, the one with carved stories. This pattern here, it means new beginning. My grandmother added it last night, after the flood. He offered it to her. Handle first. Trade you. This for your first weaving. Whenever Nancy says you're ready. Ada took the knife, felt the weight of history in her palm. That could be months, years, even. Nancy says I have clumsy fingers. I'm patient. His hand covered hers on the knife handle, warm and sure. We're good at waiting. My people, we waited through the long walk, through broken treaties, through 100 floods. We can wait for one white woman to learn to weave. Just weaving. Whatever you want to learn. His thumb traced the pattern on the handle, the one that meant new beginning. Everything worth knowing takes time. The sun set behind them, painting the rocks the color of promises. Tomorrow there would be work rebuilding, replanting, reshaping a world that had been washed clean. There would be those in Dry Creek who'd resent the changes, those among the Navajo who'd question accepting an outsider so fully. But tonight, Ada Beaumont stood by moving water with a borrowed knife and a borrowed dress, and a future she was only beginning to imagine. Free to choose, as her mother had wished. Free to stay, as her heart demanded. And when Ashki's hand squeezed hers gentle before letting go, she knew that some choices, the best ones, were worth everything they cost. Part 7, The Other Side of Fear. The autumn moon hung fat and golden over the canyon. 4 months after the flood that had changed everything. Ada sat by the teaching fire, showing young Annie Yazzie how to form her letters while Benjamin Sosi practiced his sums on a slate board. The outdoor school met 3 evenings a week, white children from Dry Creek riding in during daylight, Navajo children joining after their shepherding duties. "Miss Ada?" little Rebecca Morrison asked, the captain's daughter brave enough to be the first town child to attend. "Why do you wear your hair like Nancy now?" Ada touched the neat bun wrapped in traditional style, secured with silver pins Marinez had gifted her. "Because Nancy taught me it keeps the dust out better than bonnets. Practical things last longer than pretty ones." "My ma says you've gone native." The girl continued with the blunt honesty of 8-year-olds. "Says it ain't fitting." "Your mother's entitled to her opinion." Ada kept her voice mild. "Now, who can tell me what 7 times 8 makes?" The children bent to their work, 2 peoples learning side by side. It hadn't been easy. Those first weeks saw parents on both sides keeping their children home, suspicious of what mixing might bring, but slowly. As test scores improved and children came home excited about what they'd learned, resistance had crumbled like sun-dried clay. 56, Benjamin announced proud, then added shyly, "My sister says that's how many sheep we need to trade for a good horse. Is that right?" "Depends on the horse," a familiar voice said from the shadows. Ashki stepped into the firelight, back from a week guiding surveyors through the canyon lands. Dust covered him head to toe, but his smile shone through clear. "And depends on who's doing the trading." The children giggled, well aware that their chief was known for his shrewd bargaining. Ada felt her heart skip the way it always did when he returned from the trails, safe and whole and here. "Children, that's enough for tonight," she said. "Practice your letters. And remember, test on Friday covers both Navajo words and English." They scattered into the night, Rebecca climbing up behind her father's man, who'd waited patient through the lesson. As the hoofbeats faded, Ashki settled beside her on the log, careful to maintain proper distance with others still about. "Surveyors find what they were looking for?" Ada asked. "Railroad men. Want to run tracks through Sacred Canyon." His jaw tightened. "Told them they'd have to move the mountain first. And good luck with that." "They accept that answer." "They will when the federal report shows the route's impossible." He pulled out a roll of papers. "Amazing what government surveyors will find when you show them unstable geology and flood patterns. That Eastern education of yours comes in handy. They actually listened when you wrote those geological assessments." Ada smiled. "Turns out reading all my father's mining reports taught me something useful after all." They sat quiet, watching the fire die to coals. Around them, the village settled into evening routines, women finishing their weaving, men tending to horses, children's voices carrying on the cool air. It had become home in a way Dry Creek never was. These months of learning and teaching and slowly earning her place. May Delaney came by yesterday. Ada said eventual. Brought news from the trial. Ashki tensed beside her. And Keller got 20 years hard labor. Federal prison in Kansas. Rusk got 5, with possibility of early release for his testimony. She poked at the coals with a stick. Also said Keller's ranch is being divided up, some going to the Chavez family, Some to the other families he cheated. The rest will be sold. Money going to the treaty fund Judge established. Justice, then, of a sort. Of a sort. Ada watched sparks rise into the darkness. May also said Thomas Whitman's been asking about me. His freight company needs someone to manage their books. Good salary, house included, in Denver. The silence stretched long enough for nightbirds to fill it with their songs. That's a good offer, Ashki said finally. Safe, respectable, far from here. Yes. You considering it? Ada turned to look at him direct. Would you have me consider it? I'd have you do what makes you happy. His hand found hers in the darkness between them. Question is, what does this? She said simple. Teaching children who want to learn. Living where the stars aren't hidden by smoke. Being part of something instead of just existing beside it. Even though it's hard winter's coming, you haven't seen how cold these canyons get. How scarce food becomes. And there's still plenty in Dry Creek who'll never accept you being here. Let them disapprove. Ada threaded her fingers through his. I've got Nancy teaching me to preserve meat and dry vegetables. Mary Nez showing me which plants survive frost. Sam Bigay explaining water patterns so we never get caught by floods again. I'm learning. Ashki, slowly. But I'm learning. Not just survival skills. From what Nancy says. Heard you delivered the Bigay twins last week when the midwife couldn't come. Ada flushed. Their mother did all the work. I just caught them and kept them warm. Though, she smiled at the memory. They're beautiful babies, strong and perfect. Made me think about, she stopped, suddenly shy. About the future, what it might hold. He squeezed her hand gentle. I've been thinking about that too. The council meets next week to discuss the water agreements for winter. Also, he seemed to gather courage. Also to approve new members of the tribe. Full members, with all rights and responsibilities. Ada's breath caught. New members. One member in particular. If she's willing. If the council approves. If... He turned to face her full. If she'd consider making this official. Not just as a guest or teacher, but as one of us. With all that means. And what does it mean? Ada asked, though she knew. Months of watching, learning, understanding the weight of belonging. It means accepting our ways as your ways, our struggles as your struggles. It means any children would be raised in both worlds, bridging what others say can't be bridged. He touched her face, gentle as spring rain. It means marrying according to our customs. If you'd have me. The words hung between them like stars, bright and impossibly distant, and suddenly within reach. The council might not approve, Ada said, buying time while her heart raced. A white woman, even one who's proven herself. The council's already discussed it. Grandmother made sure of that. Said any woman who'd pull Rusk from a flood and teach his daughter letters the next month has proven all she needs to prove. Rusk has a daughter. Lives with her aunt now. Started coming to classes last week. Quiet little thing, but smart. Ashki smiled. Told me her PA wrote from prison. Said to mind Miss Ada and learn all she could. Said maybe learning would keep her from making his mistakes. Ada felt tears prick her eyes. I didn't know. Lots of things change when you give them room to grow. His thumb wiped away a tear that had escaped. You haven't answered my question. Which one? You asked several. The important one. Ada took a breath that seemed to contain all the seasons she'd lived through spring's terror. Summer's trials, autumn's settling, and winter yet to come. Yes. Yes, to which part? All of it. She laughed through her tears. Yes, to the council. Yes, to the customs. Yes, to children who call two worlds home. Yes, to you. Ashki Nez, though you'll have to teach me the proper ceremonies. I'd hate to accidentally marry your horse instead. He laughed too, rich and warm as summer thunder. The horse might object. You're a terrible rider. I'm improving, You fell off yesterday." The snake startled me. It was a stick. They were both laughing now, leaning into each other while the stars wheeled overhead. When the laughter faded, he kissed her soft and careful, mindful of who might see, but with promise of more when proper ceremonies allowed. "There's something else," he said when they parted. "Letter came from Fort Defiance. Colonel Mather's been reassigned. Permanently. Seems someone in Washington got wind of his plans to use federal troops for land grabs." "Imagine that," Ada said, innocent. "Wonder who could have written to the Interior Department with documented evidence of corruption. A mystery. Though whoever did it has excellent handwriting and knows how to word things, so bureaucrats pay attention. My father always said a well-written letter could change more than a dozen guns." "Smart man." Ashki stood, pulling her up with him. "Walk with me." They walked the path she'd learned by heart now, past Hogan's where people called out greetings, past the new well they'd dug together after the flood, past the expanded school where tomorrow she'd teach algebra to children who'd never have learned it otherwise. At the canyon rim, they stopped. Below, Dry Creek's lights flickered like ground-bound stars. Above, the real stars told stories she was learning to read: the winter markers, the rain prophets, the navigation guides that had brought peoples across impossible distances. "No regrets?" Ashki asked. "This life's not what you were raised for." "I was raised for ledgers and tea services and keeping quiet while men decided my fate." Ada leaned into his warmth. "This life teaching, learning, choosing, building something that lasts. This is what I was meant for. Just took me a while to find it." "And us," he wrapped an arm around her. "Proper distance abandoned in the darkness. What were we meant for?" Ada thought about it, about the strange paths that had brought them together. A runaway bride and a chief who'd lost faith in outsiders. A flood that washed away old patterns. Children learning side by side while their parents slowly, carefully, rebuilt trust. "We were meant to prove them wrong," she said finally. "All of them. The ones who say peoples can't change, can't learn, can't build something better than what came before. We were meant to be the bridge." "That's a lot of weight for two people to carry. Good thing we're not carrying it alone." She gestured at the village below, the town beyond, the vast country around them slowly, painfully, learning to see itself new. Change starts small. One classroom, one well, one marriage that says the old hatreds don't have to last forever. "One marriage," he repeated, smiling. "I like the sound of that, though Nancy says you'll need at least 3 months to weave your wedding dress. Apparently your fingers are still too clumsy for proper patterns." "Nancy's a perfectionist." Ada turned in his arms, facing him full. "But she's right. I want to do this properly, your way, with all the meaning that carries. I've spent my whole life having things done to me. This us, I want to choose it with my eyes wide open." "Then we wait," he said simple, "and learn, and build, and when spring comes." "When spring comes." Ada agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of promises and dust and home. They stayed there a while longer, planning futures neither could fully see, but both determined to build. Below them, the two communities slept uneasily side by side, still learning to trust. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, debates over water usage, conflicts over customs, the steady work of turning former enemies into neighbors. But tonight, under stars that blessed both peoples equally, Ada Beaumont and Ashki Inez stood on the edge of something new. Not just a marriage, but a declaration that understanding was possible, that different worlds could meet without one destroying the other, that love could grow in the most unlikely soil. The autumn wind carried the scent of piñon fires and coming snow, of endings and beginnings mixed inseparable, and Ada, who'd run from one life into another, finally understood what her mother had meant. Live as you choose, not as you're chosen. She was choosing. Every day, every lesson taught, every word learned, Every bridge built between peoples, all of it a choice to create rather than destroy, to heal rather than wound. And when spring came with its ceremonies and celebrations, she'd choose again, publicly and permanently. But in her heart, the choice was already made, solid as the red rocks that had sheltered her, enduring as the stories carved in ancient stone. She'd chosen to stay, to teach, to love, to prove that some borders existed only in minds too frightened to cross them. The moon set behind the western mesas, and still they stood together, planning tomorrow while treasuring today. And in the village below, children slept peaceful, dreaming in 2 languages of futures their parents could barely imagine. It was a beginning. Part date: horses on the salt road. A year later, the spring market at Dry Creek looked like something from a dream or a nightmare, depending on who you asked. Navajo blankets hung beside Missouri calico, the smell of fry bread mixed with baking pies, and children of both peoples chased each other through the stalls while their parents pretended not to notice. Ada stood behind her teaching booth, showing curious townspeople the primers she'd developed English on one page, Navajo on the facing one. Illustrations drawn by Nancy's steady hand, Rebecca Morrison, now fluent in both languages, helped demonstrate the lessons to skeptical mothers. "I never thought I'd see the day," May Delaney said, stopping by with a basket of preserves to trade. "Indians and whites doing business peaceable as you please. Course, some folks still ain't happy about it." Ada followed her gaze to where Keller's cousin, Marcus Holt, stood with a group of bitter-faced men. They'd arrived from Texas a month back, claiming rights to Keller's former property, making noise about savage lovers and race traders. So far, Captain Morrison had kept them in check, but Ada could feel the tension like storm clouds building. "Let them stew," she said. "The water agreement holds, the school's thriving, and even Dry Creek's making more money with the expanded market. Hard to argue with prosperity. Men like that don't need logic to argue," May warned. "You be careful, especially with—" She glanced meaningful at Ada's middle, where the slight swell barely showed beneath the loose trading post dress. "Nancy says I've got 3 months yet," Ada said, hand protective over the growing life. "Plenty of time to finish the school term." "Nancy also says first babies come when they please, not when expected." May's eyes went soft. "Your mama would be proud, you know, seeing you here, building bridges she could only dream of." Before Ada could reply, a commotion erupted near the horse pens. Ashki's voice rose sharp over the noise, speaking rapid Navajo, then switching to English. "These horses bear our mark. They're not for sale." Marcus Holt stood at the pen gate, rope in hand. "Bills of sale say different. My cousin bought these animals fair and square. Your cousin bought many things that weren't his to buy." Ashki's hand rested on his knife, but his voice stayed controlled. "Those bills were forgeries, as the federal investigator confirmed." "Federal investigator." Holt spat tobacco juice dangerously close to Ashki's boots. "Probably in your pocket like everyone else round here. Well, there's new law coming. Real Americans who won't stand for mixing of the races, who'll put everyone back where they belong." "And where's that exactly?" Ada stepped forward before she could think better of it. The crowd parted, some eager for confrontation, others shrinking from it. Holt's eyes raked her with contempt, taking in the Navajo dress, the silver jewelry, the proud way she stood. Whites with whites, Indians on reservations, and race traders. His smile was ugly. "Well, there's special places for them too." "You mean like the federal prison where your cousin sits?" Ada kept her voice pleasant as Sunday tea. "Amazing how quick real Americans turn criminal when they can't steal what they want legal-like." Holt's face went red as sandstone. "You watch your tongue, woman. Just 'cause you spread your legs for a savage don't mean—" He never finished. Ashki moved fast as lightning, but not to strike. Instead, he caught Ada's wrist just as she swung the heavy primer at Holt's head. stopping her hand an inch from his temple. "He's not worth it," Ashki said quiet. "Maybe not," Ada agreed, breathing hard. "But it would have felt good." A ripple of laughter ran through the crowd, both Navajo and white. Even some of Holt's companions cracked smiles. There was something about a pregnant schoolteacher nearly braining a would-be tough man with a spelling book that cut through tension like a sharp knife. "You think this is funny?" Holt snarled. "You think you've won something here? This ain't over. Not by a long shot." "No," Captain Morrison said, pushing through the crowd with 2 soldiers. "But your time in Dry Creek is... Mr. Holt. You and your associates have 1 hour to leave town. Don't come back." "On what authority?" "On the authority of keeping the peace. And Mr. Holt." Morrison smiled thin. "Those horses you're eyeing, they're evidence in an ongoing federal investigation. Touch them, and you'll be bunking with Keller in Kansas." Holt and his men left, but not quiet. Threats and curses followed them out of town. Promises of return, of justice, of putting things back the way they were meant to be. "They'll be back," Sam Begay said, watching the dust of their departure. "Let them come," Nancy said fierce. "We've faced worse than Texas blowhards." But Ada saw the worry in Ashki's eyes, felt it in the protective way he kept her close as they walked through the market. The world was changing, yes, but change birthed violence as often as hope. That night, they held council in the Big Hogan leaders from both communities gathering to discuss the threat. The water agreements had held through their first winter. The shared school was producing children who could navigate both worlds. But success bred resentment among those who preferred the old divisions. "We need more than Captain Morrison's soldiers," Joseph Tsosi argued. "We need legal protection, proper documentation of our agreements, filed in Phoenix and Washington both." "I'll write the documents," Ada offered. "I've been studying territorial law. If we structure it right, make it about commerce and education rather than race." "You'll make yourself more of a target than you already are," Mary Nez said. "These men, they don't fight with law books." "Then we fight both ways," Ashki said. "Law for those who respect it, strength for those who don't." He looked around the circle. "We've proven peoples can work together. Now we prove they can defend what they've built." Over the following weeks, they prepared. Ada wrote letters to newspapers in Phoenix and Santa Fe, documenting their successes, making their experiment too public to destroy quietly. Nancy organized the women, both Navajo and the braver townswomen, into a watch system. Children practiced running to safe places when the school bell rang in warning patterns. And the men, reluctantly but necessarily, cleaned weapons that had gathered dust during the peaceful months. The attack came on a market day, when the communities mingled closest. Holt had found allies, discharged soldiers, failed prospectors, men who blamed their failures on anyone different from themselves. They rode in shooting, scattering crowds, torching the trading stalls where peoples met. But they'd underestimated their targets. The watch bells rang before the riders cleared the town limits. Children vanished into practiced bolt holes. Women appeared on rooftops with rifles, and the men Navajo warriors beside white shopkeepers formed a line that stopped the charge cold. The battle was brief but vicious. When the smoke cleared, 3 buildings smoldered, 6 men lay wounded, and Marcus Holt lay dead in the dust, brought down not by Navajo arrows but by May Delaney's shotgun when he'd tried to torch the schoolhouse. "Couldn't let him burn the primers," May said shaky, looking at what she'd done. "All that work, all those children's futures." Captain Morrison arrived with reinforcements just as the surviving attackers were being rounded up. Federal marshals followed within days, drawn by Ada's carefully worded telegrams about an attack on a federally recognized school. The investigation that followed revealed a network of bitter men across the territory, planning to restore what they called the natural order. Letters were found, weapons caches discovered, plans for attacks on other places where peoples dared to mix. "You've kicked a hornet's nest," Marshal Henderson told Ada as he prepared his report. These ideas don't die easy. Neither do we, Ada replied, one hand on her swollen belly where new life kicked strong. And we're building something worth defending. The trials made headlines back east. Frontier communities unite against hate, one paper proclaimed, though others were less kind. But what mattered was that the water agreements held legal weight now. The school gained federal protection, and slowly, carefully, other communities began asking how to replicate what Dry Creek and the Navajo had built. Ada gave birth on a full moon night, Nancy and May attending while Ashki paced outside like every expectant father since time began. The baby came with the dawn, a daughter with her mother's green eyes and her father's strong chin, citizen of both worlds by birthright. "What will you name her?" Mary Nez asked, cradling the infant with practiced ease. "Elizabeth," Ada said. "For my mother. Elizabeth Sage Nez. Sage for wisdom. For the plant that cleanses. For the color of the desert after rain." "A good name," Mary approved. "She'll need all of those things in the world she's inheriting." That world continued to challenge and change. The salt road that gave this part its title. It became a symbol of the new trade routes, not just for white goods going one way and native crafts the other, but for ideas. For children who grew up speaking two languages as easily as one. For young couples who saw no strangeness in loving across old boundaries. Tomas Chavez, that stable boy who'd helped Ada escape, returned from Tucson with an education and plans to open a legal office serving both communities. Rebecca Morrison announced her intention to become a teacher like Miss Ada, scandalizing her mother but making her father proud. And Thomas Whitman's freight company, initially skeptical, began hiring Navajo guides exclusively, finding them more reliable than any others. There were setbacks, there always are when people try to build something new. Federal policies shifted with political winds. Drought tested the water agreements. New arrivals to the territory brought old prejudices. But the foundation held, built on something stronger than law or commerce, built on children who'd learned together, on neighbors who'd pulled each other from floodwaters, on the simple, radical act of seeing people as people rather than as categories. 5 years after that night when Ada had fled in darkness, she stood again at the wash where Ashki had found her. The water ran clear and steady, fed by the careful management both communities practiced. Elizabeth played at the shore, building tiny stone hogans while her baby brother Samuel slept in his cradleboard. "Any regrets?" Ashki asked, echoing his question from years before. "Only one," Ada said, leaning into his warmth. "I wish my mother could see this, could know that her kindness to your people during that hard winter came full circle, that her daughter found the life she'd wished for me." "She knows," Mary Nez said, joining them with the slow steps of age. "The ancestors watch. They see their children choosing hope over fear, building instead of burning." She smiled at Elizabeth, who'd run to show her a particularly fine pebble. "This one will walk even further on the bridge you've built. Her children will know no other way but cooperation." "From your mouth to the spirit's ears," Ada said, using the phrase Nancy had taught her. As the sun set over the canyon lands, painting the rocks in shades of blessing, 3 generations stood together by the water that had once threatened to divide them but now sustained them all. The salt road stretched into the distance, marked not just by wagon ruts, but by the footprints of peoples learning to walk together. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was chosen, every day, by people brave enough to say that the old ways of hate and division weren't the only ways, that children could learn in 2 languages, that love could cross any boundary, that communities could share both water and dreams. And in the end, that's what mattered, not the grand gestures or the dramatic rescues, though those played their part, but the daily choices to teach, to learn, to reach out rather than pull back, to build rather than burn. Ada Beaumont, who'd run from a life chosen for her, had found her way to a life she chose daily, and in choosing, had helped others find their own power to choose as well. The stars came out over the desert, each one a story, a possibility, a promise that the darkness never lasted forever, and somewhere in that vast tapestry of light, new stories were already beginning, stories of Elizabeth Sage Nez and all the bridge walkers who would come after, carrying forward the truth that peoples could change, could grow, could find their way to each other across any distance. The salt road glittered in moonlight, and life moved on it in both directions, carrying hope forward and prejudice back, until only the hope remained. Thank you all for listening to this story of love and courage in the Old West. I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from? Please share in the comments below so we can connect and exchange thoughts about Ada and Ashkey's journey. If this tale touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Night, like this video, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of hope triumphing over hatred. Until the next time, partners, keep riding toward the horizon where all peoples meet as equals.